Hello and welcome to the next session we have going on here. Now we're going to be talking about OpenID, shared signals, CAEP, and RISC, real world use. And we have two great speakers. They're going to be better at me than talking about it and pronouncing it. I'm going to introduce both of them and then let them take over here. The first person I'm going to introduce is Atul Tulshabagwali. He's a CTO of Signal, co-chair of Shared Signals Working Group, OpenID Foundation. And by the way, both Atul and Josh, who I'll introduce next, you can contact both of them. Their email addresses are pinned in the chat, so please take a look there. And the other person, the other speaker you're going to be hearing from, who will be the next one you hear, is Josh Terry. He's a group product manager at Duo Security, and his email address is in there as well. Josh, take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I appreciate it and really excited to be here. Before we get started, I'd love to first encourage you to take a look at your right-hand pane there and take a look at the poll section. We want to understand what is the familiarity of you that you'll have with these concepts of shared signals, CAEP, RISC, before we get started, just to kind of set a benchmark. So do take a minute, fill that out. And while you're doing that, I'm actually going to turn to Atul, who's an expert in this space. Atul, really excited to have this conversation with you. Can you tell us a little bit about what is the Shared Signals Framework, CAEP, RISC? What is this all about?
Sure. Before I get started, just like to thank the Identity Defined Security Alliance for having us and having me on this session. And so jumping right into it. So how this all sort of started was back in Google when I used to work for Google a few years ago, and I was working on the BeyondCorp. The BeyondCorp is the zero trust solution from Google, and I was working on a specific thing in there called the Devices API. And we were concerned about how device management signals could be delivered to where they were needed. And at that time, a continuous authentication was like a big thing, and people were trying to figure out how to do continuous authentication. And you would hear people talk about it, but nobody really had a good solution, or there were some proprietary solutions, but not something that was like a standard. So what I did was I basically just wrote a blog about how this could be done using an asynchronous publish and subscribe mechanism, and that sort of blog post became very popular, and there was an informal group of about 30 people from all different companies, very large to very small, meeting informally in various places. We had a meeting in Google, we had a meeting in Microsoft, and some other places. And so we definitely seemed like we were onto something. And there was an independent group in the OpenID Foundation called RISC, which were trying to solve the problem of whether when there is a coordinated account compromise kind of attack on different consumer service providers like Google, Facebook, something else, how do we prevent these coordinated attacks? And now, while the application area was somewhat different, the mechanisms that they were thinking about were pretty similar. And so we decided that there should be a common mechanism that we can both use, and that's how the shared signals framework was born, right? And the shared signals framework is really just, you can think about it as a secure webhooks framework. Now, for those who don't know, a webhook is something where you call an API and then you're expecting a response, after some time, right? Asynchronously. And today, many APIs have webhook capabilities, but many of them are actually just proprietary. But what the shared signals framework provides is a open standards way of providing these webhooks. And so what the shared signals framework does is basically provides a asynchronous mechanism to create streams of events, send events, receive events, start, stop, pause streams, add subjects of interest to the streams, provide a mechanism to subscribe to specific events that you might be interested in, and things like that. So it's a pretty comprehensive framework. At the same time, it's very simple, as you will see. And based on that, we have CAEP as an application now. CAEP, which started as continuous access evaluation protocol, is now called a continuous access evaluation profile of the shared signals framework. And then RISC is another application on top of shared signals. So in terms of applications, CAEP is used mainly for it's used mainly for zero trust kind of applications where you want to attenuate sessions in flight, and so you want to convey information about sessions in flight, right? And RISC is more about account compromise or account events, like you've deleted an account, or you've sort of paused an account and that kind of stuff. So those are the two differences. So I want to turn it around to Josh, and I want to ask him, because he's sort of working on this, and I would like to understand from Josh, what are some of the real world use cases that you see, Josh?
Yeah, thanks, Atul. You described some pretty powerful technology there, and when I first learned about this this new standard, I was really excited because I had started hearing from our customers that they were experiencing challenges specifically around BYOD, around SaaS, and I really wanted to dig into that. What were those kind of authentication and access security challenges that they were facing? And one specific customer comes to mind. It's a very large, heavily resourced customer in the technology industry. They have, a very mature zero trust platform that they had in place that could continuously authenticate and monitor for risk signals, and then also enforce those zero trust access decisions continuously. But when I spoke with them, they described that their one major gap was in these rapidly proliferating SaaS use cases where they didn't have either the visibility to do that level of enforcement or the controls to be able to continuously revoke access if they saw anything going wrong. So both their identity teams felt like they were sort of blind and didn't have the tools to build access policy, but also the security teams, if they see something going on, they didn't really have the hooks to go into each of those applications and make sure that the security was being enforced properly. So, that really struck home, that conversation, as well as dozens of other conversations I had around just the need for there to be that layer between applications, between security vendors, service providers who are building tools that customers want to use so that they can do their jobs well, and making sure there's that translation layer between those in order to effectively provide that secure access experience. So yeah, that's kind of one kind of area that I'm really interested in, and that we've seen a lot of excitement around. So what I want to ask you though, what are some examples of where you see that technology applying in that space? What are your thoughts on that, Atul?
Sure. I mean, you kind of hit the nail on the head, right? I think, session revocation, right, is one of the primary sort of use cases that we see, where you may have a user who's signed in using an identity provider or IDP into various service providers, or SPs, and that's sort of the SAML terminology. OIDC kind of uses slightly different terminology, but you might be signed in using an IDP, like let's say Cisco's Duo IDP, and then you might be signed into an application that might be like Salesforce, right? And so and a user may be signed into hundreds of these, right? And so if something like maybe Duo discovers that, hey, there's something wrong with this user, we need to, or it could be just something simple like the user has changed their password, and they need to re-authenticate to the service providers. You need a mechanism by which you can convey this information to the service providers. And CAEP has this session revoked event where it can actually say to the service providers that I have revoked this session with the user. Now you can do whatever you want with that information, right? So CAEP in general is a descriptive protocol. It's not a prescriptive protocol. So it does not require the receiver to take any particular action, but it is just an expression of some information that the recipient would be would find use for, right? And so, session revocation is definitely one use case. And then the more advanced use cases, like where you may want to modulate the resources that a user has access to based on some changes that you've made. Like, for example, if on the identity provider side you discover that, hey, the user should no longer have to access to this particular resource for whatever reason, you can generate an event like a token claims change event using CAEP and send that to the receiver saying, now this, I had previously signed on this user to you using this token. That token had these claims which gave that user access to these certain resources. I'm now changing those claims to be these other resources now that the user has access to, right? And so accordingly, the service provider can change what the user has access to dynamically based on the receipt of these demands. So those are two common use cases. The other one, which is very interesting, is the device compliance kind of use case, where and Josh, I'm sure you're very familiar with this, where the device that the user is using to access certain services falls out of compliance. Maybe it doesn't check in with the device management service. Maybe it was discovered to have some malware on it, or something was wrong with the device. Now you need that information to reach all the service providers or all the entities uh, that are in session with the user, and you can use a CAEP event called device compliance change in order to indicate that to wherever it needs to be.
Yeah, I'll add to that, Atul. What I've been talking to a lot of service providers about this, and that specific use case is something they're really struggling with, right? Their core competency is in building the productivity tool that solves the customer problem, or solving some other type of problem in the organization, and they're being asked to build all these security capabilities on top of it, and there's a tension there. And so for service providers, just the ability to partner with effectively a tool that does device posture checks is something that that we're seeing is a huge benefit for those service providers, and gives them the ability to go to their joint customers with those identity providers and say, look, we can provide a secure access solution that continuously checks that device context, that device trust. So I think that's a really exciting kind of first step use case that we're really focused on.
Yep. I see a couple of questions. Maybe we can take a minute to answer the questions in the chat here. So I think the first one is, what is the expectation of service providers here? Do they need to adhere to CAEP protocols, or can this be done via SCIM, right? So I think SCIM is, and Josh, maybe I'll take a stab at it and you can follow. SCIM is good for conveying account-related changes, more so than conveying dynamic sort of session-related changes. And CAEP is sort of better for conveying session properties changes, unlike SCIM. Did you want to add to that, Josh?
Yeah, I think that for us, we want to make sure that we're able to effectively revoke those sessions, or in some cases remediate the sessions. And so, yeah, when we dug into this with our technical support, we thought that CAEP is really the best tool for the job there. The shared signals framework that prescribes how those messages are sent and received is the best way to transport that information. But yeah, that definitely different use cases depending on what you're trying to accomplish there.
And definitely we see some of the same people in the standards bodies, right? Like, for example, Nancy from Cisco is the chair of the SCIM working group, but she's also active in the shared signals working group. So we clearly see the distinction between what SCIM can do and what CAEP can do for us. So the second question that we can get to here is are big IDPs on board with adopting CAEP features, and what timelines are we looking at for real world implementations, right? So let me start by saying at least a couple of instances of IDPs talking about CAEP. One is Microsoft implemented a feature internally called continuous access evaluation, and that feature is based on CAEP events, although it, as I understand it, it does not use the shared signals framework as yet. There is interest, but that the current implementation doesn't do that. And it's also sort of between their own services. So it is, if you are a third-party service provider and you would like to use CAEP with Microsoft, that may not be possible today, but certainly there is interest and commitment from Microsoft, as you can see that they're using it internally, right? And of course, Josh, maybe you can talk about Cisco's announcement as well.
Yeah, as an identity provider, Duo is 100% moving forward with the shared signals framework with CAEP and RISC. I just mentioned the one use case that we're focused on. In the short run, that's something that's undergoing active development. We really want to move that standard forward. We've done a lot here in terms of helping promote the standard with service providers to help build out that ecosystem as well. A lot of my technical partners are part of the working group that ratified the original standards here. And so, as a identity provider, we are focused on pushing this forward and see this as a crucial part to connecting those security dots for our customers.
Yeah, and I think CAEP is relatively new, and so I'm sure you will see more adoption. There's certainly a lot of interest among identity providers, and I've myself spoken to a lot of people who work at different identity providers who are interested in implementing CAEP, and obviously many of them are also active in the standards body. So you will see, I'm sure you will see implementations going forward. So there's one more question here, which is, why use OIDC versus OAuth versus Azure AD SAML? So I think the way I understand this question is, what is unique about CAEP or FSF or RISC that is not already provided by OIDC versus OAuth, versus SAML, right? So SAML, OIDC both provide single logout, so it is possible to revoke a session that was established using those protocols, using that, but the support for that right now is somewhat lacking. And where it really makes a difference is the different kinds of events that you can support using CAEP. Those are not possible in those existing protocols. So if you build sort of the CAEP capability, I suppose, you will have much more use for it than just being able to do a single logout, which even today is not easily implemented in all these existing protocols. CAEP is a simple way of doing it, and then you get a lot more going forward.
I might introduce a real world example there that helps kind of illustrate that point. So we partnered with Box.com to help build out an initial proof of concept implementation using the shared signals framework, using CAEP, where Duo was checking posture continuously and sharing that with Box. But you can imagine, and we've heard from our customers, a scenario where Box has unique information about that user's behavior that only Box has knowledge of, right? And in those situations, it's actually quite valuable for Box to share that with that organization's security infrastructure and tools. So for example, if the customer is using something like a Box Shield, some sort of data loss prevention tool with Box, and that tool detects risky behavior on part of the end user, that's actually valuable information that could indicate that the rest of the user's account needs to be more heavily monitored or more heavily enforced in some way. And so this type of a framework moves beyond just some of the OIDC limitations, SAML limitations, and allows kind of that two-way conversation between service providers, identity providers, other security tools in that customer's organization. So that's just another kind of a real-world example there.
Yeah, I think you bring up a great point, Josh, that unlike SAML or OIDC, where the communication is largely one way between, from the IDP to the SP, right? CAEP is actually, you can say, a multi source of truth kind of protocol, right? So if you have a device management service, that can be sending out device management signals. If you have a identity provider, it may be sending out, session revocation or password change or those kinds of signals. You may have a service provider who's looking at the behavior of the user, like you just said, and deciding that this user is behaving anomalously, and they could send out, signals of their own, right? So it's not just sort of a unidirectional IDP to SP kind of communication, right? It's multi-source of truth kind of environment. And that was one of the original points that I made in the blog post, which is, it's not just communicating between IDP and SPs. It's a lot of the infrastructure needs to talk to each other.
Absolutely.
So I think maybe
I had a question actually.
Yeah.
Let me jump in, Atul. We've talked a lot about the benefits here of this protocol and what it can accomplish, and really hoping to spark a lot of ideas that come out of that. But I'm curious, what are we doing in terms of lowering the cost of implementing it? What are we doing to make it really easy for service providers to implement, for customers to understand, things like that? Love to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, and I mean, hats off to Cisco for that again, for providing the sharedsignals.guide website. And if anybody goes to sharedsignals.guide, it's a website that is dedicated to a shared signals framework, and you can build a shared signal transmitter or a receiver using the open source that is available from there. And also what we're doing in Signal is today we have announced the availability of a free CAEP transmitter that if you're developing a receiver, you can actually test live against, right? And I can jump into a demo shortly about that. And if you don't mind, I can start the demo right now.
Yeah, I'd love to see it, Atul.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. And here we go. Okay, so this is fresh off the press, just launched this morning. And so all of you are getting to see this for the first time. So what CAEP.dev is basically just a online transmitter that helps you test your receiver implementations, right? And so what we have here is, just a way, to send events. You can learn a little bit about how to build a transmitter, how to, what is CAEP, and some details about the protocol and all that. And then, you can register to get your own receiver. And so I'm going to register as myself. And here we go. So what happens now is I get in my email, I get a registration token. So I'm going to bring that email into this window that I can share. Oh, I guess I can't do that. So let me do this. I'm just going to open the link here in this window here. So I got an email, and I'm going to open that over here. So what happens now is I get the chance to enter some information about my organization, and I'm going to, just enter the information. The receiver URL is just an identifier, so I'm going to enter something that works. I complete the registration. I get an access token, and I download it. Now, once I download it, I'm able to now create a stream, right? So to create a stream, normally you would have your own program that you use to create a stream. But if you don't have one, you can download the Postman collection, right? And it's just a set of HTTP requests that you can make. And so I've downloaded the Postman collection, and I'll import it here into my Postman. And I'll select the file here. All right. And so now I have the Postman collection in which I have a create stream method, and I have a poll method for polling for CAEP events, right? So in the create stream method, all I need to do is provide my access token, and I provide that here. This is the token. Sorry, this is the I need to get the token from my what I downloaded earlier. So I'm going to paste it here, and then I'm going to send the request, right? So the request contains the delivery method. I'm choosing the poll method. CAEP supports both push and poll, and I'm requesting the session revoked event. This is just for the demo. I'm just going to do session revoked, right? And so when I send that, what I get back from the receiver, from the um, CAEP transmitter is, yeah, now the stream has been created and it supports the session revoked event, right? Now what I can do is go to the caep.dev website and I can request an event to be sent to me, right? So again, I need to enter my access token. I say it's a session revoked event, and then the subject value, I'll just say hello at IDS, right? So this is for some reason, hello at idsalliance.org's email needs to be revoked, or session needs to be revoked. And so I'm going to send this event to my receiver, right? Now, what it shows me is the content of the event that I will get. And so it says that, oh, this is the session revoked event. It's for this user, hello at idsalliance.org, right? And so now what I can do is I can go back to my Postman. This is my receiver. Again, I can poll for this information. And so here you will see that, I enter my access token, and in the body, there's no, what it needs, the way the poll specification works is you need to acknowledge any events that you've already received, but there are no events that I've received so far. So I'm just going to leave that blank, and I'm going to request to receive that event, right? So what's going to happen now is I get back the event, and the event is a set of sets. These are security event tokens. This is how the stream works in CAEP. And then it has the particular event that I requested, or that I pulled for. And so if I go to in decode this JSON web token, you'll see that it is for my receiver that I had entered, and it's for that user that and the event is basically a session revoked, right? So here you saw, this is the demo. So here you basically saw, how simple it is to use CAEP both as a transmitter and as a receiver. And you have this website, caep.dev, where you can go and try it out for yourself. So I'm going to stop here. Josh, I think you're on mute. We couldn't hear you. Yeah.
I haven't dusted off my Postman skills for a couple of years now, but I think I could probably pull that off. So that's really cool.
Great. Yeah, I hadn't used it before this demo for long, so I was able to do it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think if there are any more questions, we can answer those.
Gentlemen, I don't see any more questions. We're down to about the last minute. So I'd say this is a good time to have any closing thoughts, and then we'll wrap.
Right. Yeah. Thank you so much, Jeff, for hosting this, and I really appreciate the opportunity from this organization for having us speak and talk about this exciting new protocol. So I'm going to go back to heads down to making this real world reality for our customers, and thanks Atul for your time.
Sure, and thanks Jeff for having us, and just would like to add that Signal as a company is committed to the standards, and like you're seeing it with caep.dev, we are helping the community build capability for the standards, and our interest is mainly in the authorization in part of it, and so the dynamic authorization use case that I spoke about earlier is something that we are very interested in seeing realized using standards. Thank you.